maybe this is a 50-year-old thing. Maybe it's just a me thing. I don't know. But like, just, I don't necessarily have that energy. And even if I did, I don't know if I want to expend that much.
There you go.
Like
Yeah.
I don't want to be putting in 12-hour days. And I'm sure there's other people out there, 18-hour days, whatever it was. I don't necessarily want to be doing that anymore. Kind of, I think
that's a way that you can, again, extend this in that infinite game where you don't have to like burn yourself out till you're 65, 75, whatever this retirement age is going to be, and then try to jump off a cliff. It's like, no, I can sustain myself for getting creative, creating some leverage, like leveraging, getting that leverage, and then like going again in a sustainable way, whatever works for you. But you got to understand what you want, what motivates you, and then create that leverage so that you can create that cycle that works for you in an almost indefinite pattern, right?
All right. Welcome back to the show, everybody here. It seems that we kind of have an official name for the podcast. It's an unofficial name. And you probably already know this because you're looking at the title on YouTube, but I'm just going to go with Gen X Unplugged just because I wanted to, I don't know. I sat there and I brainstormed all these different ideas. Like what doesn't sound cheesy in marketing, but then what kind of has this tie to Gen X, right? So I was thinking like unplugged, like remember the whole 90s unplugged thing, like Guns N' Roses started it. Well, I don't know if they actually started it, but like, and then you had Alice in Chains and Nirvana and everybody was going unplugged for a while in there. So like, I don't know, whatever. That's inside my brain. So that's what we're going with. Gen X Unplugged. Again, I'm Corey and this is Mike. And we just talk about different things kind of related to, getting old, like, being 50 plus, 40, well, we can accept some 40-year-olds in there too. We're just looking for Gen X people, and we're just looking for people, or looking to help people that are just kind of looking for maybe what's next, or what's from this point on, even because there's a lot going on. We've done a lot, we've been told a lot, and we just need to figure stuff out. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm Corey, and then Mike, you can introduce yourself right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Corey. I'm Mike Buccialia. I'm the founder of MindWorks. MindWorks is a coaching program to get to the source of our stress, which I believe is a scattered mind. We're pulled in a bunch of different directions. We got different, activities and to-do lists we got to manage. And I help people bring that together because an aligned mind is a mind that works for you. And that's really the biggest productivity hack we can ever endeavor on. So that's me.
All right. And I'm Corey Koehler, so you say my last name. And I don't know, I got like a laundry list of things because I've done that. I've been calling myself a serial self-reinventor lately. Like that, I've been just putting that in my social tags just because, I've been through a lot of different phases. My current phase is, other than my daytime gig, which is, like I'm a Google Ads manager / marketing consultant. But what I've really been jacked up about lately is just kind of talking about this stuff. And I started a blog / newsletter called Redefining Retirement. So all that stuff will be in the show notes. And before we get started, if you like this stuff, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And anytime, anything hits you when you're listening to us, drop a comment below because it was awesome last week when you had a comment. I was like super excited. I mean, we're not getting a ton of views right now, but like that comment was like awesome too, by the way. So thank you for the comment. It really is, we love them. So anyway, today, what are we talking about? We are going to talk about a couple things that we're going to kind of mash them together. First, the price of doing your own thing. We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to kind of bleed into something called like energy management, right? Because when we get older, it's not as easy. You don't have like endless amounts of energy like you do when you're like 20, right? I mean, you start feeling that way in your 30s, and then you get to your 40s, and it's like, then it gets a little bit worse. And now in your 50s, you're like, all right, let's just trim the fat here and move on. But first, so before we get to that, the price of doing your own thing. And this kind of was born out of our first podcast. And one day I've had been walking, because last week was the 12th anniversary of me being self-employed. Right. And that's kind of what inspired this post. I took a picture, like I went for a walk in the morning, and I'm like, oh, what a beautiful day. And it's like, and then I started reflecting like, oh, I wasn't able to do this when I worked my full-time gig because, I would have been either getting up and getting ready to go to work, or I would have been at work already, right? And I wouldn't have been able to do anything about that until what, 4:35, depending on when I got done. I was a salary guy towards the end there, so could have been anything. But it made me reflect, like, it hasn't always been easy, going, because I went through a lot of really low points, but I had some really high points, right? But I've been able to level it up and just be higher, right? Because when I left my job, I was here, but I would say, even though I've dipped below the line along the way, now I'm like up here, right? In many ways, it might even be more than that, right? It might be exponential, just because who knows if I would have gone through some of these ups and downs in my job, where now I've got these different skills. And I guess the comment that I made in there, and I'm just going to read it verbatim because otherwise I'll butcher it. But I just said, I walk by this spot almost every day on my daily walk. It's a time of the day that, had I been at full time, working full time, I'd rarely experience, because I'd likely be at work. This is one moment that reminds me of why I wanted out so fucking bad. I and why I work so hard to keep it that way. And I guess that was kind of like the big takeaway, right? So that's the key, right? Like, those are the moments. It's not like I'm sitting here eating bonbons all day, and, like, I kind of did that in the beginning, honestly. I used
That's a
to.
very 80s reference right off the bat, Corey.
Yeah, it is. I don't know where I came from, but yeah, because when you grow up, like, the first time I remember reading the 4-hour work week, and you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna have all this time. I'm gonna go dancing in Argentina. I'm gonna learn how to kickbox in Thailand. Like, I'm gonna do it all. Like, that's what the 4-hour week taught you. And I got into that trap the first couple of years that I was self-employed, but once I lost a couple clients and didn't have money coming in, it taught me really quickly that, like, you know what, it's not quite that easy. But still, those moments are made possible by the difficult stuff that you had to do and the growth that I had to accomplish. And I am rambling, and I think that you should say something right now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the thing, and we banter about this a little bit, but the thing that really struck me about that, Corey, is you were so clear. Like, I just wanted it so fucking badly, right? And I do think that is a major component to people designing a life they want to live. Whether I think we need to keep resurfacing this idea of around redefining retirement simply means also redefining how you're evaluating yourself. Those highs and lows are a foundation of our measure of ourself, right? So yes, if you go on this journey, you're going to need to re-baseline yourself, right? Because it's like your only choice. But whether you're redefining that in terms of how you're putting your energy towards work versus life versus starting to make some other plans, what do you want so badly that, when you talk about a price of something, that's like, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to start changing? What are you willing to face? That the key moment there for you was like, I just want this so bad. I want a change in my life. I want to change, like, the things I'm doing, how I'm feeling, the people I'm around, whatever that looks like for you. There has to be, like, we got to search for that kind of deep desire, because without that, it's all those ups and downs you talked about are going to be extra challenging. But you had that kind of ultimate focus of just like, I want something different. And I think that's a really pivotal moment. I'm not sure you would have gone through the challenges and the roller coaster ride that you did if you weren't so clear on that thing. You need to be clear on what you were going to do, how you're going to make income, what businesses you're going to run. Like you said, you've done probably at least 6, 7 different things, if not more. But the one thing you were clear on is like, I'm changing my life, redefining, who I am. It's not just like retirement or business. It's like, who am I in this process? And I think that's the key thing that we need to be paying attention to, especially as we, get older, and it's like, is this what I want my life to be? And we start to think, well, but this is what I'm skilled at. This is what my job has been. This is the network I have. And all that we can change. We built it up. We can build it again. We just need to believe in ourselves and find that real motivation of like, do I want something different from my life? Is something about what I'm experiencing not working? Do I want to go address it? Because that's the real source of drive.
It's one of those things where, and I can't pinpoint the moment that it happened, but somewhere along the lines, there was definitely a shift, and a lot of it had to do with, like, I just wanted to get closer to the value, like getting rewarded for the value that I provide. And I've got this old, what was it like? If you've been on my newsletter, you probably read about this a million times, but I was talking about this moment where I came up with this idea for a new socket pan. I was in engineering, I was a mechanical draftsman, and this thing cost like $80 roughly every time it went through because it just had a lot of components to it. Then I came up with this idea like, hey, what if we did this? And then basically I made it go from $70 down to like $15. And when you're talking about thousands of times a week
Mhm.
going through the plant, that's a lot of money. And then you start thinking about that, and then you're like, oh, and then I still get the same pay, and I get like an attaboy and and a dollar raise or something like that. I mean, it got better towards the end, um but besides that, it was just like, how do I get closer to that value, right? And that's kind of what started me down that path. And yeah, it
Yeah.
was it was tricky. And once I finally did get out, I remember one time I had one of my first clients offered like, hey, we got some office space, man, if you want to come and work out of our office, you should come. And I go, you know what, Dan, his name's Dan, I've spent the last 6 7 years trying, working my ass off to get out of a cubicle. I do not want to go back into one, even if I'm just your client and I'm working there, even though that's a whole other issue. Like, do I really want to be working at my client's office so they can be looking at over my shoulder and seeing like, oh, are you working on my stuff now or who else? But besides that, I just told them, I'm like, look, I appreciate the offer, free office space. That's great, but I can't do it for those reasons. And that was, so anyway, what were you going to
Yeah.
say?
Well, no, I mean, you're getting into another aspect that's important, Corey. Like you had that moment where so this is, I think, a pivotal thing. You had that moment of like, I'm worth more. You were internalizing like your own value. It's like a self-belief type of thing, right? Like, and you acted on it, right? I think we all have these moments. And then speaking from my experience, like I know I've talked myself out of, nah, I'm not good at that. I couldn't, for the longest time, I convinced myself I needed a company, I needed direction, I needed resources, right? Like I was terrified of going out on my own because I was lacking a lot of self-belief. I had no idea that was going on. And it was like that self-talk, if you will, just kind of saying, I can't do it. Whereas you started like, hang on, I just created something of immense value here. And I didn't get any, extra compensation, reward, acknowledgement, beyond the basics. And you were like, I'm delivering a lot of value. I'm capable of something. And you acted on it. And those combinations of having that positive self-belief, positive self-talk, all which can be cultivated, by the way, because I didn't have it, or at least I wasn't cultivating it. And then acting on it. You have to act. So it's one thing to build yourself up a bit, right? But then you got to take action. And when you went, I've got really something to offer here and I'm going to do it on my own. It took me so long, Corey. My story in that I was in sales a long time, right? And so I literally had this belief like, oh, I'm a good salesperson, but I need the marketing department. I need the sales material created for me. Like, I don't know how to do those things and I wouldn't be good at that. And all this stuff was just a way to keep me from the fear of like being on my own. But when I got through that and I started to reflect, I'm like, oh my God, like the largest contract I ever did was $100 million contract, right? Like I worked in enterprise, large sales stuff, right? And then I started to accumulate all the other smaller like the smallest contract where I was working on was like roughly $1 million. So I would do like million, 10 million, that kind of size deals. And the largest one was 100 million. I'm like, I probably did $500 million, maybe $1 billion of contracts that were like going through, obviously it's team and all that stuff. But my point is, holy cow, I delivered all that value for other people. I have all this skill, but I never like really internalized it and recognized my own worth and value there and then acted on that. So that process, like whatever instinct you had to just act on it is like a fortunate thing. And I'm trying to share all this to say, I didn't have that instinct. I had to cultivate it. And I just want people to know that it is possible. And that clearly, throughout a life of 40, 50 years, you've delivered value and learned so many skills. We just need to sometimes recognize it, believe in ourselves, and then act on it. And that's the real key to kind of just getting started. Like you said in the beginning of this podcast, we're just getting started. Views, comments are like nothing, but you got to just have enough like gumption and belief that, you know, you've got something of value to offer and figure it out. But that self-belief plus action is a real essential part.
Yes, that is a key. And one other thing that kind of, and this kind of segues into our next topic, is the one other thing that I knew the whole time that I was kind of starting to put together, like, okay, what does this look like when I do this? You know, because I didn't just have the socket pan experience and then all of a sudden next week I quit my job. It was more of like, I would say it was 6, 7 years, 5 to 7, somewhere in there, where I started piecing together because I just started going down rabbit holes and I started learning about different things. Like I learned like Google Ads. I learned how to do WordPress because I had a fantasy football blog. I learned how to I learned how to create podcasts, and this is like way back in the freaking, you know, Iron Age, like way back. And there wasn't very many podcasts back then, and you didn't have a phone to listen to it on. You had to actually download it onto an iPod to
Right.
actually listen to it. So I learned all these skills, and then that you know, that started to kind of bleed into my job, which was extremely helpful because one of the kids of the owner happened to notice that I had a fantasy football blog, and he's like, "Oh, you know about this website stuff, and you know, like, looks like you know what you're doing, what you're doing, blah blah blah." He's like, "You think you could help on our website at work?" And I'm like, yeah, probably. So that led me into a role at work where now I was going to be able to start to practice and learn even more in a full-time role. And I didn't go to school for marketing. I didn't do any of that. It's just everything that I'm learning, you know, all the people that I've, you know, was reading online and all that, and all the stuff I was doing on my own and learning about. And I eventually went from mechanical drafting to an estimating, which is you know, long story short, I don't know how to explain estimating to everybody without going too crazy. But then I went into marketing, and then that's where I said, oh, by the way, I, you know how to do these Google ad things, or AdWords it was called back then. And, you know, and then it's just kind of, I sat there for a couple of years, and, you know, and got even better. And then that way, when I did move into a self-employed role, I had already had these skills. I had a story to tell. And that's like a big thing that I try to tell new people a lot too, is like, have a story to tell. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to go out there, like you've made this decision that like, I've got these skills and I can do this and I can get these results for people and solve these particular problems. Well, you need to have some stories to tell around those problems, because that's, you know, and that kind of dovetails a little bit into what we talked about last week with the sales, right? Like getting comfortable sales. I mean, you know, you're not selling, you're just telling a story about how I got results for somebody else. And then they're like, oh, well, shit, I want those results too, right? So there you go. That's kind of how that all evolved. But one thing I did know, or the other thing that I did know when I was going through this whole process, is like, I knew that if I was going to be starting over again, I wanted to make sure it was going to be something that was like more long-term, more sustainable, for lack of a better word. Because like I said in the beginning, I'm kind of a serial self-reinventor. So when I did drafting, that was like actually like my second career, because before that, I don't even know if you'd call it a career before that, because it was like I worked at a series of like, I worked in restaurants, I worked in factories. Foundry was probably one of the longest stints that I had, like just working in an iron, you know, hot. That wasn't, you want to put some hair on your back and some freaking calluses on your soul, go work in a foundry for 3 years. That was a fun one. Um, but yeah, that, and then multiple others. Like I even have a post about like how I had 19 different jobs. So I was all over the place before that. And there's a long reason for that. You know, there's a lot of things going on in my 20s that caused that. But I'm like, oh, here we go again. You know, I went through all this trouble to get out of the foundry because I was going to school full time and I was going to the foundry, you know, so it was like just these long, relentless days, which I had the energy to do back then. So when I started going through this, oh shit, here we go again. I thought The Office was my savior. I'm like, oh,
Right.
all I got to do is get into the office and it's going to be so great. And it was, I mean, the first, I don't know, I was there for 17 years at this company. And I would say the first, I don't know, 7 to 10 were like, yeah, it was great. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. I'm like, I'm in a desk job all day. And, you know, yeah, I'm getting a little fat. I guess I got to think about working out now because I'm not at the foundry burning like 10,000 calories a day. I'm probably exaggerating on that, but I'm not too much. So, but yeah, eventually I'm like, no, this isn't right either, and that's when you started doing it. So it's like, okay, well, what is right? Because if I'm going to do this again, I don't want to have to do this again. So I guess long story short, I just wanted to get really good at learning things, and I wanted to get good at stuff that I just like to do. And I'm naturally curious. So it's like, how can I harness that? How can I just, always be learning and staying on the front? And that's kind of what I'm doing now. Even
Yes.
though I'm in the middle of a potential pivot right now with my business, or at least I'm hedging my bets because, I'm just a little unclear on search engine marketing. That's a whole other topic. But it's like now I have all these skills. I know what it's like to have to, work for myself, manage myself, sell
Yeah.
myself, all this stuff. That sounds really bad. Sell myself. Um, like
Oh, no, like you said, you're able to
I just
share your
I have a dirty
story.
mind.
Yeah. Yeah. You're sharing your story. You're conveying the value you add, right? Like that is a big barrier for people to be able to convey themselves in a position of, hey, I have this service, I have this product, and it's whatever. Either I designed it, or I'm backing it, or I'm delivering it, whatever it is, right? You got to be able to sell yourself and be able to share your story, and people want to know that, as you said, right?
Yeah, and now I'm back in this process again, not starting from ground zero like I was back then, but again, it comes down to like, okay, here we go. I'm gonna have to do some things differently. I'm gonna have to start over. I'm gonna have to start looking for what's next. And the one thing that's way different now than it was even when I was in my early 40s is my energy level. Even in my 40s, I was man, I would say late 30s, early 40s. I mean, I would work and then I would come home and I would work on my side hustles, right? Like I would write blogs for my fantasy football blogs, like I'd sit there all day Sunday afternoon as the games were going on and then into Sunday night. And I'd write my blogs and then I'd have to write one, so I was always doing a lot of extra stuff after work. And that's in addition to working, that's in addition to, dropping kids off and moving them from here to there, swapping days to cook supper and do dishes and all this stuff. I mean, it's not quite like that anymore. My kids are older, but back then there was a lot going on and I had the capacity to do that. And now as I'm switching, I'm just getting like, and maybe this is a 50-year-old thing. Maybe it's just a me thing. I don't know, but like, I don't necessarily have that energy. And even if I did, I don't know if I want to expend that much,
There you
you
go.
know, like
Yeah.
I don't want to be putting in 12-hour days. And I'm sure there's other people out there, 18-hour days, whatever it was. I don't necessarily want to be doing that anymore. And I think the age thing kind of, it reminds me, if I compare it to my physical health, right? Like when you're in your 20s, you can go drink till 2 a.m, get up at 6, work at a hard job at a foundry. Sure, you're a little tired, but whatever. You get off and it's like, you know what? I got to play softball today. I'm going to go play, 2 games of softball after work. And then I'm going to drink again, like, or whatever, it's like, you're constantly doing stuff. I was in the military for a while back then too. And it's like, you just have endless amounts of energy and sure you're sore, but it's not the same kind of sore or the same kind of tired that you start to develop in your 30s. You get to your 30s and you're like, oh, I remember we had this young guy playing softball for us one time and he was one of my buddy's brother-in-laws. And we were in our early 30s and he was like this young guy and he's like, oh, you guys are pathetic, blah, blah, blah. Like you're complaining about your hamstring being sore or whatever. I'm like, yeah, well, just wait, buddy. And that was me in my 30s telling him to
Oh,
just
yeah.
wait. Well, it's like, well, wait till you get to your 50s, because then it's really like you're not even at baseline when you wake with morning. Some days you're like already below baseline. You got to try to come up. So if you use that same analogy and put it to like the mental side and the drive side and the hustle side, it's kind of a similar thing, right? So
Yeah.
now it's really looking for, okay, what do I have? And just trying to be very efficient about everything. Like what do I have to use? What do I already know that I don't have to go down this rabbit hole? Like what's, what to leave in, what to leave out. Old Bob Seger line there for you.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
and it's
that.
like, yeah. So it's just like, so that's kind of where I'm at now, right? I'm just trying to hack away because it's not the same. And that's one thing that that I started this blog and why I'm talking to you, it's because I feel like there's something to pass on, because there's so many, we'll call them bro marketers or whatever out there that, like, you know, you listen to these guys talk and they're like, all you got to do is X, Y, and Z. And then, spend, even though they say they're spending like 4 hours a day, they're spending way more than that on it. And there's all kinds of stuff going on in the
Or, I
background.
mean, I think with that stuff, Corey, maybe some people are spending a few hours a day, but they're leaving out the hours and years to get to the point where they only, it's like they're selling jump to the point I'm at when you're starting, from a different point and you're a different person and you got, right? So who knows what the truth is with that stuff. But the point is, like, that stuff comes with, effort and build up and, over time. Right. So I don't know. I'm sure, like, I believe in the realm of everything's possible and anything's possible. Like, if you want to start something completely new and you can just work at it 4 hours a day, if you're the type of person that is like, can do deep work and get really into it, maybe, I'm sure that's possible. Right. I would say that's probably uncommon, but doesn't mean it's not possible for some people. But typically, you're spending some real time and effort. It builds up to the point where it's like, this click, that click, I've learned that thing, I learned that thing. To your point, now I can stop doing these activities because these are the most impactful activities. I learned that over iterations, and now I can spend my deep work time thinking, writing, strategizing, and then, another few hours of executing on that. And, I've got a 4 to 6 hour kind of workday. I believe that's practical and possible, but usually that comes after many hours and time of iteration and learning and such. But real quick, I just wanted to kind of connect a few things you were saying there, Corey. Like, we go way back to the beginning when we started talking about that. You had that initial moment of like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I have to go figure something out for myself. And then you use this word reinvention, right? And then, so what you're saying is you tried different things and you had that. First of all, you want to get out of the foundry, and you loved the office job for a period of time, right? Mm-hmm. I think what's happening now is that period of stability that hopefully some of us got to enjoy. Yes, exactly. And so you had that 17 years, right? But maybe that's shrinking to 7 for some people. Maybe that's shrinking to a year or two, because these layoff cycles in corporate jobs in particular are happening more rapidly. There's less loyalty on both sides of the equation. And so the point is, you had some time, you had that 7 to 10 year kind of like quite extended honeymoon period of like getting out of that laborsome work into an office job, which felt nice and, stable. But then, you evolved, the work probably stayed similar, whatever. And then you had to reinvent. And it's this process of reinvent, knowing what you want too, right? Like, you wanted that at that stage in your life. And now what I'm hearing from you is you want to dial back the energy and the output a little bit, right? You want something different. And so you have to reinvent again, like, who do I need to be to have this life that I want in a work style that works for me? That's what if we can constantly ask ourselves that question, who do I need to be to get what I want? I love how you're saying redefine success, redefine retirement, whatever you want to use that, and then reinvent yourself to match that definition. If you can do that, get into that habit, that process versus the habit of staying the same. I think that's where I want to stay. We can either have the habit of staying the same while the world's changing around us, and we can struggle with that, or we can get in the habit of evolving with ourselves, being clear on what we want, and then becoming who we need to be to get what we want. And I think that's how you redefine retirement, and you're constantly evolving with yourself and your circumstances. And that's a long game, right? Regardless of what you're actually doing, regardless of how you're generating your income, what you're doing to serve people, how you're engaged in your community, whatever, that will continue to evolve as you continue to evolve. And that's the real long game, is this evolution, reinvention, redefining process, not necessarily what you do as a business.
Yeah, there's and I wish I would have looked into this a little more before I got on here, because I know I've written about it or talked about it, but just trying to find, I keep drilling down, trying to find those core elements, like what is the fundamental, skills that you need to have so that you can pivot into anything, right? Instead of, that's really what you want to focus on, because it's like, you can specialize in all these other things, but like, if you boil everything down, there's certain skills that you need to have. You want to you want to be able to like have things that make you curious, because curious is like a flywheel, right? Like it pulls you through. So find those things that make you curious. There's other things like with some other stuff, like we talked about sales last week, right? Like if you kind of understand the basics of sales and you understand the storytelling and that side of things, you're always going to be able to tell a story and sell what you're working on, no matter what it is, right? So like those are two core elements. I'm probably missing some other ones because I
I
didn't
mean,
really think
the
hard
one
about it
for
right
me
here, but
is, I don't know if you call this a skill, but it definitely can be cultivated, is courage. Because that,
yeah,
courage to break the norm, courage to change habits, courage to go learn something from new. Like this, I'll speak for myself. There's another challenge I faced, is that, I don't know if this is common terminology, but beginner's mindset or learner's mind. It's like going back to where we're learning something somewhat from scratch. I mean, we have so much experience to draw from once you're kind of 40, 50, right? But
Mhm.
being a novice at something, it was scary for me. Again, I'll speak for myself, because it's like, oh my gosh, like I don't know what I'm doing, where I had built up, some knowledge base, some, reputation, at least in my own egoic mind, right? Of like, I'm good at this skill and I have to go learn something new or learn something about myself. And it just takes courage, because it's confronting. It's out of our comfort zone. It was scary for me. I think it's pretty common to be off-putting or scary for many people. So that courage to go try something new, to learn a new skill, to be in that state of mind and state of body awareness where it's like, this is uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what the result is. That is really just a courage thing. And then, curiosity is another one to kind of be a big motivator. Like if you just get curious about something, you're less worried about how it looks or what stage you're at or how proficient you are at it, because you're just like, wow, what is this? Like, oh man, I'm learning. And if you can use the courage and curiosity to be your like flywheel of going forward, those are, I agree, like really important things to put your attention on.
Yeah, curiosity is a big one. And I was thinking too, just to kind of go a little further into the courage part, when you kind of combine all that stuff, the other thing you start to notice too is like opportunities. Like that would maybe be another one we could throw into this core skill, is just understand what opportunities are and just be able to spot them. And that's just kind of, putting yourself in a position, and that goes with all the learning, right? Like I'm constantly listening to different podcasts, I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm reading books, like I'm doing things that are kind of, they're tuning my mind to in a way that like helps me see opportunities, because it just feels like once you kind of flip the switch on that, because I didn't necessarily look for opportunities, everything looked like, the man was against me for many years, right? But then once you started seeing like how much opportunity there is and how much everything is so exponential, the old zero sum thing, right? Like it's not a zero sum game. I mean, it's like an infinite game. Like things just go on
Yes,
forever. Things can grow.
yes.
Somebody doesn't have to lose for you to win. You know, um, it just, you start to see so many opportunities, and that's then it becomes like a challenge of like managing opportunities and trying to figure out which one you're going to do, and that's a whole other that's a whole other topic
Sure.
kind of in
But
itself.
you'd want to have at least that open mind and open field of awareness to seeing life as opportunity versus a series of challenges or roadblocks or limitations. That's a major mindset thing, right, Corey? And so I also had a lot of that kind of victim blame mentality, like the world's against me kind of stuff. That will limit how you come across, or we're constantly coming across opportunities. But if we're
Yeah,
perceiving them as threats or challenges or problems or too hard or not for me or I don't have this capability, again, that reinvention of yourself to like drop any rigidity about what you're capable of is a big factor of the opportunity. Let's put it this way: the opportunities are happening; they're all around, right? And the people that we see and define largely as successful, I've seen is like oftentimes it's not that they're smarter than us or like outworking us, even though there's some of that, right? But like it's often they're just like, oh, I saw an opportunity, I didn't talk myself out of it. I jumped on it. Had the courage and willing to take a risk and willing to fail and not be embarrassed about it. We have a less rigid definition of who we are and what we're capable of. If we have at least some self-belief that we're capable of at least trying anything, or at least most things, we'll see all the places. This is an opportunity to chat to someone. It's an opportunity to learn something. It's an opportunity to go test my sales skills. It's an opportunity to go tell my story. It's an opportunity to go network. Like, it's all there for us. We just tend to get scared or talk ourselves out of things. So I really love the reinvention idea, because the process of that allows you to see more opportunities.
You know, another thing that I was thinking about while you were talking is where you can kind of take some of the pressure off of you, like whatever decision that you're going to make, like, oh my God, now we've got all these opportunities, or whatever this thing is that you're working on right now. You have to, or at least I've had to realize that like there's more opportunities coming up, right? I used to put a lot of pressure on myself over the years, and I still do. I still slip into this once in a while where like I remember they're like, oh my God, you got to jump on this. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You know, this is never going to happen again, and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's one thing where my tolerance for dealing with that is a lot better now than it was like 10 years ago, because it's like, oh my God, I'm missing out on this big gold rush. You know, like there's always a gold rush.
Right.
And
Right.
that's the key word. There always is a gold rush, like
Yeah.
all the time, forever. I mean, I can't say because I haven't been around forever, you know, but in my lifetime, I've seen so many things like, oh my, you know, like you just thinking, you better get on this internet thing, you know, like the .com boom and stuff like that. You better get on this, man. You're going to miss out. And it's like, yeah, sure. Would we all wish we all bought Amazon stock and Apple stock and all this other stuff? Sure. Yes, we should have. But there's always been something else. Everything, there was always something else. And sometimes you just have to be aware that, you know what, if this thing I choose doesn't work out, there's going to be something else, or maybe there's a way to pivot into something else, or you don't even know what it is. Because this is another one I always tell high school kids, and I don't know, maybe I told you this one already before. If so, whatever, it works in this context too. But it's like, just realize that like whatever you're going to decide to do right now isn't necessarily what you're going to do for the rest of your life. There's no way in 1990, when I graduated from high school, that I was like, you know what, someday I'm going to be a Google Ads manager. Someday I'm going to be doing I'm going to make money, you know, writing blogs and making videos. There's just no way in hell that was even, you know, that wasn't any consciousness back then. You know, you only had like a limited amount of choices back then. Still a lot of choices, but comparatively
Right.
to today, myriad. There's so many other things. I hear people talk about all the time. They're like, kids are lazy this day or these days, or, you know, the next generation is this and it's that, and they don't have to do this and that. And I'm like, you know, the reason why a lot of these kids maybe aren't doing some of the jobs that I had to do is because they don't have to do them. You know, like all they want to do is be on TikTok and be YouTubers. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, like, if you've got a choice between being a YouTuber and like grinding away in the factory, as much as I'm proud and wear that like a badge of honor, I will tell you right now, it's way cooler in more ways than one to not have to work in a factory and be on YouTube, right? So
Well,
I can
actually,
understand
so
how that
Corey,
goes.
this is an interesting topic, and I'm not a parent, so I want to hear from you about this, because it's the irony of how things work and evolve over generations. This is a comment. It's always the generation before is always lazy, right? But that has some truth, because there's this inherent mindset is I want to make it easier. It was hard for me, and I want to make it easier for the next generation, you know, typically your own kids, or just in general, right? There's like our evolution of technology and society wouldn't happen if there wasn't that somehow intrinsic human need to make things easier, better, or whatever, right? And it's true, we're creating an environment where, okay, so for you, it was the foundry and that like real hard labor, and it was like, I want to get to an office job. Now it's like, office jobs are the hard, stressful thing. I don't want to do that. I just want to make videos and be a creator and be creative, right? You see the evolution there. And so there's something inherent about that. But it's weird, this irony of like, that's what we did. We worked hard because we had to, it was what we learned, whatever, and we wanted to make it easier and better. And then we're mad that people are taking advantage of this easier, better environment and world we created. I don't know. That's just my take.
And I don't want to, and I don't want to say like necessarily, I don't know if easier, like me wanting to make it easier for them is the best way to put that. Um, Better might be a better way to say that, because I don't want my kids to have it easy. in certain ways, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
the big thing that I, and that sounds awful, but like
No, I think life is not easy. So if we
they,
believe that
they
we
still
can
have to
like,
put in the work, you
yes.
know, and they still, you have to, it sucks. And you have to like hold your breath and you have to grit your teeth sometimes and just let them fail. I mean, you just have to, and you have to let them know that, you know what, it's not going to be easy, but you know, if you do X, Y, and Z, it could pay off in this way. I would probably say the only thing that I really taught them about, and my friends always give me shit about this because I tell them like even my most embarrassing drug use stories, and they're like, "Why are you telling your kids that?" I'm like, "Because you know what? They might be in a situation in college where like, oh yeah, hey, just have this thing, you know." And I'm like, I tell them my awful stories because I'm like
Mm,
hoping that that's in their brain. You
yeah.
know, that would be the one exception to like the mistake stuff. But like that's what I really wanted. It's not that I want it to be easier on them because you don't get stronger from ease. You know, you get stronger from, you know, hardening yourself
Yeah.
and developing these calluses. But yeah, and the one thing too is like, and this kind of comes full circle into like that part about you know, energy management and you know, trying to figure out like how to do this in a more efficient manner, you know, like the finding the next thing or working on the next thing is one thing I always look for is like things that compound, right? Like instead of working this is a big thing. This is like when this comes from my drafting mentality. Like I used to, I hated changing things all the time, you know? So it's like if I made something, I wanted it to like reverberate through the entire system. I wanted it to become a flywheel. And it's something I'm kind of working on in the background, but everything I've always done, going back to the email list stuff that I, you know, when I didn't have an email list, it's like, that's what killed me. Like with my fantasy football blog. Oh my God, I didn't have that. That could have saved me so much time. That's something that compounds. So when I put work into something, I want it to have more than just, you know, I want it to compound. I want it to be around for a while. I don't want to have to change it all the time. So that was another thing that I'm always trying to look to try to make this easier as I go forward. Because if I put in a lot of effort now, I
Yeah.
want it to like reverberate for a period of time, right? So that, like you were saying before, like your the time to change is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. I think that there are still things that you can do to kind of keep that gap open. You know what I mean? Like if you can set up your business in a certain way at this point, I believe, and I do see other people doing this, you have some runway. You know what I mean? When you do have to change, and in my business like that now, my Google Ads business is very similar to that. Like it's not perfect. There's some mistakes I've made that I probably could have set it up even better that I didn't, but it's definitely given me some runway to give me a chance to pivot if I want. You know, maybe I won't have to. Maybe I'll figure something out with that particular part of my career. But at the same time, you know, just by setting myself up and putting in place, you know, putting systems in place that compound, or you know, this video that we're doing right now is gonna be out there forever. I mean, whether
Yep.
anybody watches it, I don't know, but we could wake up tomorrow or the next day or whatever, or a year from now and still be getting views on it. So we just multiplied our time, you
Yes.
know, and you know, instead of hiding this like we were these discussions, now
Yeah.
we're putting it out there.
Yep.
And
Yep.
this is content we can repurpose this, and we could do all kinds of stuff with this, and it multiplies our time. So those are
Exactly.
other things that I'm kind of
Yeah,
looking
but
for.
let's stay with that because you're putting you. I'm really glad you said that about with the kids and hard and easy. And I almost want to kind of retract when I said like life isn't easy. A better framework for that, like, is life just is. So life is however you perceive it, right? Life is a bunch of stuff going on. Like I said, if you perceive them as challenges and hardships and whatever, then they will be. If you perceive them as opportunities, they will be, right? So that's everything I do for myself and with clients is just like, what is the lens we're filtering this stuff through? And then if we look at hard and easy, it's like, yeah, there are going to be things that require like resource from us, whether it's energy, whether it's thinking, whether it's like physical activity. And I love what you're saying about leverage because it's like if we try to like not ever do anything hard or let's call it resource intensive, then we will never be able to create leverage. Leverage is about doing that hard thing up front to get long-term reward and benefit from it. And so the hard stuff one should be about like I said, courage, understanding ourselves, facing our fears, understanding how can we simplify this? What's a task we've been avoiding that we could lean into that will simplify or become that leverage point, right? Those are the questions, like that's where we should spend like our real mental energy and like understanding like how do I simplify this? How do I create leverage here? How do I make this simpler for myself or my product or my customer? Like you said, taking the, when you're back in your draftsman days, like engineering, bringing that mindset, like we don't have to all be engineers to do that. Like if we spend time like, how can I simplify this and create that leverage? That's the hard mental work you do up front to get that leverage. And then you can go through periods of like really putting concentrated effort there and then getting the fruits of your labor, kind of resting a bit and going again, right? And that's a good methodical kind of, that's a way that you can again extend this in that infinite game where you don't have to like burn yourself out till you're 65, 75, whatever this retirement age is going to be, and then try to jump off a cliff. It's like, no, I can sustain myself for getting creative, creating some leverage, like leveraging, getting that leverage, and then like going again in a sustainable way, whatever works for you. But you got to understand what you want, what motivates you, and then create that leverage so that you can create that cycle that works for you in an almost indefinite pattern, right?
There's an analogy that you reminded me of, and I don't remember it word for word, but it was something along the lines of like, um, you work in the way that like a lion eats itself or feeds itself, right? Like it goes through this hunt phase. It gets its prey, eats, and then it's done for a while, right? And then it's just going to sit around and like just be lazy until it gets hungry again. You know what I mean? Instead of being in this constant like, circle or cycle where you're just doing the same thing over and over, instead of like eating every single day. I mean, it's like, no, it rests, and I think a lot of, it's kind of a pace, I guess you could say. And I think a lot of people, I think a lot more people are like that in general. Like we've been kind of, they've kind of tried to get that out of us, and like the man, but they've been trying to get that out of us. But I think that's in a way how humans kind of work. Like if you think about like the hunter gatherer thing, right? Like you have periods where you're hunting, you have periods where you're resting. And that's just kind of the way it is. You kind of have like this ebb and flow as opposed to just being like on all the time. It's kind of the way like artists work a lot like that too, right? They have a system where they're putting out work every day. They're doing something, but they don't have this major push like every single day, right? Like they have times where you kind of back off and then you hit the gas. And I think it's kind of just trying to find some sort of a flow that way.
Can I ping off that real quick, Corey? Because this is another thing of a limitation I had. I didn't believe I was creative. I was like, I have no creativity. This is again just like a thing I had. And there's probably many reasons for that, but part of it was just the conflated definition I had of that, which was, well, you're mentioning art, because art in particular requires creativity naturally, obviously, right? And that creativity, you cannot force it. You can't just like, I'm going to be creative. I'm going to come up with the perfect art piece today, right? It just, you could ask any artist and read anything. Like it just doesn't work like that. That's why we admire art so much, right? Because it's like, man, how much like variations and iterations did it take to get to that point? And like, it just spawns on people, whatever. But I not considering myself a creative person was another massive limitation for myself, because creativity is not art. Creativity is elegant solutioning, like elegant product or service creation, right? And just like being creative about how I'm going to solve a problem, being creative about how I'm going to talk to, my customer or whatever. There's creativity in, even just going back to my sales career, negotiation and contract structure. Like how can we creatively get past this barrier of some term we're not agreeing on? There's creativity in that, right? And again, allowing some space to breathe. Creativity is massive in creating a life you want to have, creating a business you want to have, creating leverage, right? And so we need that like restful state to allow that creativity to emerge. And I now believe, I didn't at one point, but I now believe we are all creative. We just need to allow ourselves to be creative and be open to that definition of what creativity means, which is just means allowing some solution that's a little bit more elegant or different than the standard or obvious thing, right? That to me is simple creativity.
This almost feels like this is probably the next podcast or one of the next something I just added it to the list because there's a lot of stuff we could talk about with creativity, and honestly, like creativity is more structured than you think it is, right? I mean, it's like if you give yourself a structure, it's the creativity that happens kind of between the lines. You know what I mean? Like, because if you just have a wide open field or with anything, then you end up getting stuck and you're not creative and it kills you. So that's a whole big topic. But I will say though that like I completely relate with what you're saying, because I remember in the early days when I first started writing music, in my mid 30s when I started writing songs, I'm like, I would like hoard these things. I'm like, oh my God, I got 10 songs. This is all the songs I'm ever gonna have in my life. You know, like I'm like, I better protect these, you know, like that kind of thing. And it was like as I started writing more and as I started learning more about songwriting and giving myself frameworks to work within, because that allows you to be more creative. Um, then I was like, oh shit, there's endless amounts of creativity. There's endless amount of lyrics, there's endless amount of, you know what I mean, there's so many ways you can, you can spin stuff. So it was like those 10 songs weren't going to be the only ones, and in fact, if I go back and look at them, they're awful. They're not even that they're not even that good. And it's like, well, God, whoa, that was really bad. And I'm sitting there thinking like, oh my God, I got like I've got this archive. But so just, yes, always know that you can get better, and just be more abundant minded. Like I think that's maybe the place that we stop, because I see we are getting close to the end. But yeah,
Cool.
think abundantly, people. That's the big takeaway. So any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I think this is, I hope people are finding some insight here, some useful tidbits. I think, we danced around it, but this idea of energy management, I think, is a factor of just understanding where you're at now, right? And stop resisting it and struggling it, embracing it. And also, I also don't believe in like giving into like, well, I'm old now, I don't want to have less energy, right? I'm not a fan of like kind of more that defeatist type mindset, but I'm also not a fan of struggling against the realities and where you're at. And I have experienced for myself, as I thought my energy was draining, it's because I was not doing two things, which was allowing my creative expression. I was kind of suppressing that and allowing that rest to allow that to emerge. So once I stopped fighting myself, and this is what I do for myself and with people, right? There's ways to go through that to find where the resistance is and that stress. But when I work through things to become more relaxed about who I am and what the results of, what I'm putting out there are, the energy came back. Like that creative flow was there. And I do believe we all can access that, but we got to be aware of where we're at and what is kind of holding us back or feeling like a struggle and resistance, getting to the source of that. And that will release more of that creative energy. And yes, maybe you just need some extra rest time periodically, whether that's throughout the day, throughout a week, or over a 90-day period or whatever. People are going to be different, right? But just really getting to know yourself is always my answer, right? For a lot of things.
And honestly, I would say like in my early 40s, when I was like really thinking, I'm like, I'm going to do this forever. And I used to always tell my friends, going back to your point about like the energy level and trying to, and not being defeatist about it. I used to think the exact same way. I'm like, yeah, screw that. I'm going to be able to, but it seems like it's waned a little bit. Cause like, again, I get into my 50s and I'm like, I don't have time for this. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm starting to be more realistic. And this comes from talking to older people too. It's like, when you're young, you think everything's possible and you can do this and do that, but you don't know what you don't know. And it's like, yes, I don't want to have this defeatist attitude, and I'm not necessarily going to just give into it. But at the same time, it's just like, you kind of got to be open to it, or at least you got to be prepared that it could be a factor, right? And there are exceptions, like people that are presidents and all this stuff in these big pictures. I mean, maybe they just have like some genetics that they can just keep running all the time, or maybe I don't know what it is. And I'm going to look to study those people and see what they're doing and maybe help me get better. Maybe it's something I got to do better with my diet, my health, or whatever. But at the same time, it's like, try not to kick yourself for having this image like I need to be going 100 miles an hour, because that's I would say in the last 2 or 3 years, it was a point of, what am I looking for? I was kind of kicking myself, like, and being hard on myself,
There
when
you go.
really it's just kind of the way it is. It's just like, you know what? I don't have this energy. And it's like, first of all, don't think you're screwed and game over and that's the end. But second of all, look for ways that you can improve it. Like, maybe I need to run more. Maybe I need to, maybe I need to eat better. Maybe I need to do something. There's something else out to do. But at the same time, just, you know what? If you can't, you can't. Then you just have to, again, you have to adjust. You have to figure out and try to, and if you're getting good at, being more efficient and managing your time and your energy, it might be a moot point, because yeah, I used to think, hell, I'm going to be able to do this until I'm 90. I'm going to be 90 and I'm going to be doing this and skiing and everything like that. It's like, I might not care. There's a lot of things I don't care about right now that I would have loved to have done when I was in my 20s. I'm like, I'm going to do that
And
someday.
I
And it's
think
like, now I'm
that's
like,
a
there's
big
no way I
distinction
want to do
too.
that anymore.
No, I think
So
that's an important distinction too, Corey. So I would love to take age out of this equation a little bit as a mindset. I'm totally with you. Like, there's no point kidding yourself and comparing yourself to someone else that has a different body and mindset than you, right? And that doesn't get you anywhere, even a self-image, like I think you pointed out, right? But I like that concept of, let me be real with where I'm at and just accept that and not fight that and resist that, especially if it's going to hurt yourself or whatever. And at the same time go, but is there, like, I see examples of other people being able to do this and they're different than me. Let's acknowledge that. But then just get curious, like, could there be things I could do if I want, but if you just want something different, you're just like, I just don't want to be skiing downhill blitzes. Like, it's just like not who I am right now because I've evolved and changed. Like, that's another, like, don't fight that either. Right. So that's a little bit of game, I think, in there, and it's all a factor, but it's being aware of those various factors, I think, that make the real difference.
all right, totally agree. I'm thinking, holy smokes, hours go by fast when we're talking. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna wrap this up really quick here. And just one last thing, if you've listened this far, first of all, thank you,
Good for
thank
you.
you very much, because there's so many things that you could be listening to out there. There's so many other things you'd be doing with your time, and the fact that you just spent 59 minutes and 49 seconds with us is like extreme gratitude. So thank you for that. But again, if you like this, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and comment, whatever you want to do, because we want to know what you guys are thinking too. We don't want this to necessarily be like a two-way conversation. Why not have a three-way conversation? So yeah. So one last thing, where do you want people to go to find out more? I put this stuff in the show notes.
Brilliant.
What do you
Yep.
want to do, Mike?
Mike Buccialia. You can get me on LinkedIn. That's Buccialia. And my website is mymindworks.com. That is WORX.com.
Yep. He's an X guy. He's got the X going on there. So just think about that. I don't know if I ever told you that, but that's a whole other story. But my painter friend guy was like on a freaking tangent about that. Why do you use a freaking X? Just use a goddamn, whatever. But anyway, that's beside the point. And yeah, for me, all my stuff will be below, but Corey Koehler, and like I said, if you like these conversations and more, and maybe some more in-depth stuff, just check out my website, redefiningretirement.io, and you can go there, check it out. I just geek out on this stuff all the time. So you can hear all about that marketing stuff and, what's coming next, future of work, Gen X stuff. So it's all over there. So again, thanks everybody for hanging out. And yeah, we'll catch you next time.
Good stuff. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Corey.